Okay, yeah. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for that introduction. Um, it's one little thing I'd like to add, which I found out painfully yesterday. It is no longer 30 years; it's 40 years in practice. Uh, that was very devastating to hear yesterday, but well, that is okay. Um, anyway, so let me let me try and explain, like try and figure out why I'm here in the first place. But what I will do is talk about how we got into COVID, the COVID situation, and from there discuss a little bit about our practice and how to run a private practice from my own perspective. So, in let's say when was it? COVID started probably January, February, and we were looking at things and said, look, me and my partner said, look, this thing is coming to Nigeria. Whether we like it or not, it is coming home here, and we better get ready for it. So we thought about it. Okay, what do we need to do? What are our own skills that we can use? We're not infectious disease, but we saw what was going on around the world and said, okay, this looks like there's going to be a lot of ICU patients, and that's what we do well. That's one of our skills. We're not really infectious disease, but we can run an ICU and we can get consultation from infectious disease. So we set about getting an ICU COVID friendly, so to speak. We got information from DRASA. I don't know if you know who DRASA is. DRASA is the Dr. Mayo Foundation that specializes in infection protocol practices, infection control protocols. And they came, told us what to do. We had to do some construction to make our ICU COVID friendly and separate it from the rest of the hospital. And funny enough, it looked like we were the first ICU to be prepared for COVID. I mean, the government knew it was coming. Everybody knew it was coming. I remember telling the people I knew in government, I begging them, I said, please, you people, let's shut down this airports and foreign travel till we sort ourselves out. We just do not have the ability to take care of this thing when it comes. But, you know, nobody listened to us. They actually told me to go back and mind my own business in cardiology. So I went back, minding my own business, and just got ourselves ready. We only have we're a small place. We have 17 beds all together, and we got 7 beds ready for COVID. At some point, we had to convert the whole hospital to COVID, um, and that's what we did. That is how we got into it. So pretty much, we sat down, saw what was going on, saw that all the ICUs around the world were being overwhelmed, all the hospitals were being overwhelmed. Their basic business was being shut down, and we said, well, we can't afford to get shut down and not do something about it. So we went into the, that's how we got into the COVID arena. And uh, aha. So from then, things started to evolve and develop. Most patients who usually go abroad, or many patients who usually go abroad for healthcare, found out that they were stuck with us here. And they had no choice but to deal with us. And to me, that was an opportunity for us in the private healthcare sector to up our game and make it such that once they come to visit our facility, they realize, oh, we can perform this stuff the same way they do it in the US, in India, and all these places they go. So for us, that was an opportunity. I mean, our main cardiology business went down, but the patients who came for COVID saw a different type of Nigeria. They found out that, oh, not everything is as bad as the press says, or, you know, everybody says healthcare in Nigeria is hopeless. It's not the best, but I can tell you for the past, is it 10, 15 years, healthcare has improved. Unfortunately, all the improvement is in the private sector. The government hospitals seem to be headed in the wrong direction. And I think politics has gotten a stronghold in the government hospitals. So for me, that's for my colleagues in the guild. I think this is the time to up our game, and I'm sure other speakers will tell us how to do it. But this is an opportunity. Now we made some mistakes. Many of you saw the negative press we got. Everybody comes to FCC to die. I think they said at some point we're charging 50 million, which was quite interesting. And I'd go out to function and people say, oh, Yemi, you've made it to, they calculate my beds, 50 million per bed times 17 and all that, and said, you know, you can retire now. They had no idea how expensive. We never charged 50 million, by the way. But COVID care, ICU care is incredibly expensive. It is incredibly expensive. Just the drugs, the remdesivir, the tocilizumab, all those things we were using, hoping they would work, that on its own costs like 4 million naira. Just on its own, that's because of price gouging and all that stuff. But like I said, those were the that hit us negatively. All right. Then when the COVID first phase went down, I was one of those stupid people to assume that okay, COVID has gone. We shut down our COVID ICU, went back to usual business. Then the second phase came, and we didn't buy all the PCR equipment that people buy. So from a financial standpoint, we made that mistake. We should have been prepared for the second phase. I don't know why I thought we were different, but I think we found out we are not different. So, but we stopped COVID in September and our usual business started to come back. And we started getting clients that we never had because they heard First Cardiology can do this, First Cardiology can do that. So we gained from that perspective. Then, of course, the second phase came back. So business has gone down again. We are not in the COVID business. We're trying to decide, should we go back or we shouldn't go back? Because if we go back into COVID, our regular business is going to die again. You can't mix cardiac surgery with COVID. You just can't. So this is what we're dealing with. But we get calls every day from people desperate to find a place to take their patients to. But so that's a decision we have to make. And I guess that's part of strategy planning and all that. So we are looking at things and hoping we don't have to go back into COVID. Now, let me give you some background about myself here. I went to the US right after youth call, 1982, and then did all the cardiology and all those things. Then I had always planned to come back, but each time I tried to come back, it was just difficult. It was difficult because we had a military government. Then I'd come and negotiate with them. They said, doctor, we don't have heart disease here. Don't worry, we're all healthy and all. Anyway, I finally just decided I was coming 2008. But while I was there, after my training, I worked in private practice. And we started out as 4 Black cardiologists in Charlotte, North Carolina, 4 of us. We were the smallest group. We saw mostly Black patients. But we said, look, whatever we do, let's make sure our quality is better than the other guys. Like I said, the white guys. Let's just make sure our quality is better. So that because, as a Black doctor in the US, you are scrutinized 10 times more than a white doctor. So you just couldn't make any mistakes. So surprisingly, in the South there, a white group, the biggest white group in Charlotte, now approached us to merge, and which we found quite interesting. But when we got into the group, we could see the politics. The white guys would get the best cases. We would pick up the crumbs. So I said, this is why people, I'm going to show them that Nigeria, we know they carry last. So I hustled till I became the busiest cardiologist in town. And but from a business perspective, we were small. We had a little office manager, and we were doing okay. When we joined groups, they still had a little business manager. Then at one of our board meetings, we had a board of doctors. One of our board meetings, we decided it's about time we get an executive type of business crew. And there was a lot of argument because these guys were demanding the same salary we made. We didn't think it made sense, but we decided we'd get a CEO and then a CFO. And it is amazing. Our income tripled over the next couple of years. Our income tripled. And that was the same time. At that time, Medicare was paying us $3,000 for a cath, an angiogram, as the doctors, our own fee. Right at that time, they cut it down to 1,000. And in spite of all that, our salaries, our income tripled. In fact, at some point, I was feeling guilty. I was telling my partner, I said, yeah, this doesn't look good, that our bonuses every quarter are more than some people's yearly salary. But that is the difference the executive team made. So I said, business is business. Medicine is a business. That's the bottom line. It is a business. Yes, we are doctors. We are not trained to do this thing. You can learn it. Our CEO actually was a doctor who left medicine and went into MBA and all those things you guys do. And the CFO was a finance guy. And in spite of those two salaries that came to about $500,000 a year each, our income tripled. And that just showed us that, and that's the attitude I came back with, that this thing is a business. So I started my practice. I had to make a business plan. I couldn't get a loan. I could not get a loan to save my life. They wanted collateral. I didn't have collateral. I said, okay, I have a house in Charlotte. They said, no, we don't want American collateral. We want it here. So I couldn't get a loan, but I had friends, Cyril Chukuma and co, who were in the business world, Bode Augusto. They helped me, and of course, our governor, Obaseki. They helped me write a business plan. So I learned how to read a spreadsheet, learn the difference in cash flow, income statement, and all that. But it still didn't make me an expert at running the business. But then I was a one-man show, and with 2 or 3 employees, and that's how we started. But then as soon as we got bigger, I hired somebody to run the practice. And then we got a board. When we were about 10 doctors, we decided to get a board. And this is important. As a small practice, it's difficult to afford a board. But, we all have friends in this society who are willing to help. So what we did was get an advisory board. And they're all people from different walks of life. There are 5 of them. Our chairman is Bode Augusto, who's a well-known finance person in Nigeria. And then we had a lawyer, we had a business person, and we had somebody who was in government. And we spread it around the country for federal character. And I tell you, before that board came, we never made any profit. Not one day did we make profit. Always, according to the accountant, they said we made a loss. I said, okay, as long as I get my salary, I'm okay. I don't know what a loss means. They say loss to me was a paper loss. It didn't mean anything to me. But then I found out that all the money I put in as investments into the business just became zero. So that's when I knew what that loss meant. But after the board got on board and then they started telling us what to do, giving us free advice, we used to meet every quarter. We suddenly started to make a profit. And I started hearing things like paying out dividends or reinvesting. So what I'm trying to say is we as doctors, we're not trained to run businesses. You can learn it, but it's always good to get professionals to do the job. Now, even if you get the best professionals, it doesn't mean you shouldn't go and learn something about business. You should be able to read a financial statement. So when your yearly accounts come and all that, you understand what is going on and you see where your weaknesses are. In fact, today, there's a meeting going on with our chief executive officer, with a CFA financial expert from Dubai, who's just helping us go through our statements because we're not sure, we're making some mistakes here and there. So we decided to hire somebody to do this for us. And so we as doctors who own practices need to learn the business. Unless you want to continue to run a mom and pop shop forever. I think there's no point investing this time and money and not leaving a legacy for something that will continue after you have retired and perhaps also give you some income. So, and that's one thing we did in my group in North Carolina. All of us who were on the board had to go for training. We didn't think we needed it, but when we went for the training, we realized that there's a lot to business we didn't understand. And because of the training we got, the financial training we got, business training, plus the executive management, we became the 5th highest earning cardiology group in the country. And that's in small North Carolina. So all I want to tell you guys here is you need professionals to help run the business. You really do. And I think that's all I have to say. Sorry, I don't have any slides. I just didn't think I could put this up in slides.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. I'm just going to see if there are any questions.
I didn't run over my time.
No, definitely not.
Okay, good.
Yeah. I'm just trying to, there's no, please, if the attendees, if you have any questions, please put it in the Q&A box. No. Okay, they're putting in the chat. All right. We have a question here, Dr. Ademi, actually came in the chat. It says, Dr. Johnson, thanks for sharing your experience with your practice in Nigeria do you think the landscape for getting investments and financing in healthcare has changed between then and now?
Oh yes, certainly. Certainly. A lot of money is coming into healthcare in Nigeria. A lot of money. I'm not sure I understand why. I guess the Western world has nowhere to invest their money, so they're saturated. So they're coming here thinking that everybody looks at our large population and just sees green. They just see dollar signs. Yes, there is opportunity to get money, but they're not going to give money if you don't have a properly running business. It's got to be run as a business. They've got to look at your statements and do all these valuations and things. And without proper management, you won't have what they need for them to invest in you. But yes, there are people who are bringing in money. They're local investors. They've tried to buy us out several times. Each time some arguments, our board doesn't agree. And next time our valuation goes up. So, but that's because the board guides us and tells us what to do. These are business people. So they tell us what to do. Sometimes we don't agree with what they do, but we've been following their advice and we never go against what the board tells us. And yes, there's money for investment. The CBN loan thing is part of it. But they wouldn't just give it to you if you didn't have a proper business plan. And the banks would be the ones to give it to you. So you'd have to go through the banks and everything. The big hospitals coming now. Evercare is the latest one. They came in with a hedge fund, a PE firm. They had tons of money. They even were paying salaries for a whole year without functioning. So there's that type of money coming in. And it'd be nice to attract it. If you don't attract it, you get swallowed up by these people or you'll be pushed to the side. So we have to up our game. This mom and pop shop thing we do is not the way to go. We've got to up our game, form partnerships, alliances, so that when these investors come, you are looked upon as a serious candidate for their money. These investors didn't make money by being stupid. So they are not going to invest in something that doesn't look attractive and doesn't look solid. They want their returns.
Another comment we have, this is a comment. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing. It has really opened my mind about doing business in the health sector. The role of board cannot be overemphasized. And the next one says, this is very interesting, sir. You have opened our eyes to areas we can expand into. Please, what can one do to encourage others to be in partnership for better practice?
Partnership is important, but it is difficult. All right, it is difficult. One is to get the right partners. My main partner is Dr. Gunyaki. We don't see eye to eye on anything on earth. We are totally poles apart on anything on earth. But we both come from structures where a Palestinian and a Jew can work in the same company. But for that partnership to work, you've got to have ground rules. You've got to have bylaws, and everybody goes by those rules. And then the board helps intercede when there are differences. There's no, but even if you have a twin brother and you partner with him, you'll have some areas where you disagree. And most doctors are strong-headed and like to have it their own way. With a partnership, there is what you call that, gives and you've got to. There's one word I'm trying to remember now, it begins with N. But with partnerships, you have got to be patient. You don't always have to have it your way. You think of what's best for the business, but you've got to be careful how you choose partnerships and make sure you complement each other. Like I don't like paperwork. My partner loves paperwork. I like to go out and talk to people. He doesn't like to do that. So we complement each other and try and build practice. But the important thing is find people who have the same objectives, end game, and then you work together. And then you put ground rules on board. You get lawyers to help you work out an agreement, and you go with that agreement. And once you have a partner, you should have a board. If not, you're not going to have any way of settling disputes. You're not going to have any.
Another question here is, many thanks for your insightful presentation. Do you have to look into the finances of the hospital all the time yourself, or you trust the business managers to do it?
You better look at it. The business manager will have, I hate to say it, but there's some business manager that will come to totally shaft you and you won't know. So yes, you need to keep an eye on it. You need to. You're the one going to sign the thing they give us at the end of the year to sign. I forget the name now, but you're going to sign it. That goes to the FIRS. So
Okay.
you know what you're signing. You better know what you're signing. Your audited accounts, yes. You better know what you're signing. So it's best to look at it regularly, and then you actually understand it more. You ask questions, and then if there's any funny business going on, because the first people trying to dupe us, that's how we found out. Because I had to be looking. I just didn't like it, but I kept looking at the spreadsheets and stuff. And then a patient came in who had paid for some procedures. Then she said the state was going to pay for her. So she wanted, was going to give her money back. So she wanted her invoices. And then we found out that the invoices and the receipts did not tally. So we knew something was going on there. And then that's how we picked them up. So yes, you probably, you know, I don't think you should understand what's going on.
Okay. The next question, I think you've already answered that. It says, I actually like the way you presented without slides. Thanks. I'm actually interested with the issue of mergers. How can small practice merge with the big players? I'm thinking, okay, this is a bit different. How do the smaller hospitals now merge with the bigger or smaller, the bigger players in the game?
Well, look, that's what happened to us in Charlotte. We were small. The key is you've got to prove that you have some value. That is the bottom line. They've got to see value in partnering with you. So what they saw with us was, okay, we practiced good cardiology. Then we had the black market. That's the black patients. We had 90% of the black market. And in Charlotte, black population was about 30%. So they, from a business perspective, said, look, we better try and pick this up as well and become more dominant, because there were two dominant groups in that in that state. So they wanted to be the most dominant. So they figured, okay, they work with us. Now there were issues, though, racial issues. Some patients didn't like to see us and things like that, but we overcame all of that. Yeah, but yes, you've got to show some value, and the best way to show value is expertise. Just have an excellent practice, good outcomes you can publish and show people, because that's what they go with, data. So if you don't have any data to show, just say, oh, I'm a good doctor, you will not be found to be too attractive.
Okay. The last question on the list here says, the reason why some of us small hospitals don't hand over to others is because we lack the trust that someone else will not swindle you of the money you are making. How do you overcome that inertia of letting go and letting others control the finances on your behalf? I know that is thinking small, but many are in this spot.
It is true. I think, especially in Nigeria, it's a difficult thing. Because you get advice from friends and the family. I don't trust that person. It's coming to take all your hard-earned money. Then you have to be able to give. Yeah, you have to be able to compromise and give up some control if you want to grow bigger. 10% of $1 million is a lot more than 100% of $10. So you've got to think that way. You can't have control all the time. If you want to grow big, unless you have loads of money, you can't grow big without money. You need financing to scale up. So you want to scale up to a position where after you retire, there's still some money coming into you. There's no other way. You've got to partner. You've got to allow investors to come in. But you just got to be careful how you choose them and allow lawyers and accountants and finance investment people to help guide you along that way. But yes, you have got to give up some control. You cannot want to grow big and have complete control. No, like for me now, I cannot get a top Nigerian cardiac surgeon to come and work with me and say, oh, you're just going to be on salary. He's not going to want to do that. He will want to be a partner. I can't say, well, I invested $2 million in this business. You have to bring $2 million too. You've got to give him some monetary value for what he's bringing in as well. And the financial people can calculate all that. But it involves giving up some control, unless the financial people have some other advice. But I don't see how you do without giving up some control. And you put in clauses to make sure if the thing doesn't work out, you don't lose everything.
Okay, the next question goes, thank you, Dr. Johnson. How do we assist average Nigerians to pay for quality healthcare from your perspective?
The day I can answer that question I will get a Nobel Prize for something. It is a difficult thing to deal with. It is. There is demand. That's why all these investors keep coming to Nigeria. They see our 200 million population and say, wow. But the demand is great for healthcare. The demand is there, but the affordable demand is just not there. We are a poor country. No matter how we look at it, we're not supposed to be poor, but we are. So, and unfortunately, well, I do have an answer. When we fix healthcare insurance,
Yes.
which can be fixed if we had the determination to fix it. If once we fix healthcare insurance, our healthcare system will suddenly turn around and people can afford these things. And that's the bottom line. We've got to fix healthcare insurance. However it is done, whatever system we follow, that is the basis for improving healthcare and making it more affordable. But over $1 billion is taken out every year to other countries. That was statistics in 2008. I have no idea what it is now. Okay. But my Indian colleague tells me 40% of the tourism comes from Nigeria. It's a lot. There is some money available, but the average man can't afford it. And you notice, in fact, I was talking to my partner the other day that I'm ashamed of our insurance, healthcare insurance, because they can't come to our hospital. They won't pay for them. And it doesn't seem right to me to send them to some hospital somewhere where we have no idea what quality they're getting. And but the business people say we can't afford to treat them ourselves, so we've got to have the insurance plan. So we'll deal with that, but we've got to improve insurance. We've got to. The HMOs we have now, apart from malaria and a few other things, they don't cover. And that's what people need coverage for.
Okay. I want to take these last two questions of time. But dear Dr. Johnson, in relation to your own salary, do you stick to it or do you dip your hands into the accounts?
That's a very good question. Before our board came on, we got our board. The practice paid for everything I did. Everything I did. If I took a girlfriend to a hotel for dinner, they would pay. My kids come to visit me from abroad, they would pay everything. So life was easy. And we run at a loss, but I didn't care. I was okay. Then they came and said, no, you can't do this. We're going to monetize everything. And they put us on a salary. And God knows that's been difficult since then. It is much tighter. But after some time, you learn how to live within your means. Because I was trying to live like I was living in the US, where I had a lot of money. Now, and that's one thing, those people trying to come back, you've got to kind of adjust your expectations of income. And Mr. Augusto tells me I don't know how he put it, but our Naira goes further here than our dollar does in the US. So our quality of lives are better, but you should expect a cut in income coming here. But it is also a better quality of life, apart from the no light, Boko Haram, kidnappers and things. Everything else here is perfect.
Okay, the last question says, thank you so much for this informative session. Do you think a partnership by a doctor and another individual that is not a healthcare provider is a progressive venture?
Well, if I understand the question, that means you have an investor.
Or two of you are two people that own the hospital. One is a healthcare provider and the other one is not a healthcare provider. I think that's more.
Yes, to me, that sounds like somebody's investing in your practice.
More or less.
Yes, it can work, but you've got to have lawyers and financial people look at the papers and make sure you are both on the same page. That's just important. It can work, but you've got to be careful. It can work, but you see brothers fighting over their father's will when they die. So everybody can disagree with each other. You can disagree with anybody, including your wife, your brother, your twin. So you've got to be careful to make sure you have an arrangement that is looked at by lawyers and looked at by financial people, so that if this thing doesn't work, you don't lose everything. So yes, it can work, but no partnership is easy. It's not easy. It's never easy.